Hello, and welcome to this video of AOPA's 11th grade Virtual Teacher Workshop. My name's Michael Hantgartner, and I'm the Senior Manager of Curriculum Development here at AOPA. This video is specifically aimed at all of you who are going to be teaching our UAS curriculum in the spring semester. I'm very excited about the part of the year that this video is going to cover, because it's the one where, as the name implies, we're finally able to take things from theory to practice. Students are finally going to get some hands-on experience flying drones and learn how to work as part of a drone team. Now, before we get into the content in the two lessons that I want to talk about today, I first want to set the stage by providing some context. In Unit 8, we don't actually have a video that covers the content, and that's largely because Unit 8 is going to be a review unit, aimed at preparing students to take the Part 107 examination. Now, one thing that I would instill in students during this unit is the need to study outside of class if they plan to take the exam and do well on it. Now, the test isn't inordinately difficult, and if they do put forth the time to study, they should easily be able to pass. But at the same time, I don't want them to feel like because they've had AOPA's curriculum through 10th grade and then 11th grade that just by sitting in class every day, they're going to be able to go and do well on the test, because that's probably not going to be the case. They are going to have to make a concerted effort to study. After Unit 8, though, they will have the opportunity to take the Part 107 exam. And while they aren't compelled to do so, I am hoping that a lot of your students decide to take the exam. It will allow them to immediately have a very valuable certification and to work as commercial drone pilots. So following Unit 8, I'm hoping that a number of your students are going to be Part 107 commercially certificated pilots. And then that will take us to Unit 9, where students are finally going to get that hands-on experience and learn what flying a drone is really about out in the real world. The first lesson that I want to focus on is going to be Unit 9, Section A, Lesson 3, and this is called Learning to Fly, Fundamentals of Control. And this is essentially flight school for the students. This is the lesson where they learn how to manipulate the controls of the drone and fly it. As a warm-up for this lesson, you're going to start by giving the students a demonstration with the classroom drone. Now, you'll want to demonstrate an entire flight. We'll go through the pre-flight, launch the drone, show them how some basic maneuvers are done, and then recover the drone. Now, this is something where if you personally don't feel comfortable yet flying a drone, that's fine. It's very likely that at least one of your students is going to be a pretty proficient drone pilot. And so feel free to let a student do the demonstration if you would rather not be the one flying. After this point, the rest of the class, it's going to be a 4-session lesson. And it's all going to be aimed at getting the students some stick time and learning how to manually fly the drone. So on the first class period, this is going to start by forming the students into groups. And the groups are going to be the same groups that the students are going to use in the next lesson, which is going to be the final project for the year. So the benefit here is really twofold. One, students are learning how to fly a drone, but two, it's going to serve as a team building activity. Now, in the beginning sessions of the class, you're going to want to start with basic maneuvers, and different groups are going to practice. What you'll want to do is assign different group members different team roles. So you're going to have a PIC, you might have a manipulator of the controls that's separate from the PIC, and then you can also have several visual observers, and maybe a team member whose responsibility it is to pre-flight the drone and then post-flight it. Now, one thing that you're going to want to emphasize is that during this lesson, all of the members of the team should be able to try out every role in the group. So you're going to want everyone to get a chance to actually be the manipulator of the controls, give everyone a turn at being PIC, give everyone a turn at being the visual observer, etc. Now, in the beginning, you're probably going to want to start with basic maneuvers. So the group is going to learn how the drone is launched, how to go forwards, backwards, from side to side, etc. And then progressively, as you get to, say, session 3, you're going to want to give the students a chance to try out some more advanced things. Feel free to create any obstacles in the classroom that the students might try to fly through. Maybe you could create a more confined landing zone and see if they're able to land in that place. So, there's going to be a lot of room for you as a teacher to be creative during this class. Then in session 4, you're going to evaluate all the groups. So you're going to have them fly a brief but full mission for you. You'll have them start with the pre-flight, launch the drone, and then you can give them a series of commands or maneuvers that they'll carry out and then recover the drone. Once they've flown these missions, you might ask them a few questions. Ask them what went well, and if anything didn't go well, what they might have done differently. Now, this is going to look a little different depending upon what exactly you have available as far as resources go. For example, you might have several drones in your class, or you might just have a single classroom drone. If you do just have a single drone, that's okay. The biggest thing I would emphasize is that you're going to want to have several batteries for it. Otherwise, you're going to be restricted to a very short flight time and you're not going to get much flying done within the class. So you're going to want to have several batteries so that you're able to charge some while others are being used. And that way, even though you just have one drone, you're still able to keep it in the air throughout the class. Other things that you can do if you do have one drone, you can also try to download or purchase a drone simulator. Those can be good ways for learning. There are some that you can get on phones, iPads, and then also some that you could download onto your computer. There are a variety of different simulators out there, and it can be a great way for one or two groups to be practicing on a simulator while you have another that's actually using the drone. And finally, other ideas that you might adopt, you might have a group that's simply acting as an observer group to the group that is actually flying the drone at any given time. You might also just have groups kind of go off to the side and try chair flying a complete mission. And that's walking through it step by step. Before you start, you would want everyone to be assigned a role, and they would basically just go through a mission, each of them vocalizing what they would be doing at any given point. Now at this point, everyone should have gotten some chance to fly the drone. And as they go through this project, they're going to want to be thinking about what roles they naturally gravitate toward, because this is then going to be important in the final project. Now, the final project is one that I am really excited about. Your students are going to get a chance to actually perform a real-world mission for a client and to help out another group. The way that this is basically going to look is the lesson is going to be 12 sessions long. And you're going to have each group, and again, they're the same groups as before, choose either another student group within the school or perhaps a not-for-profit community organization that they're going to help out by providing some kind of service or product using the drone. Now, this is intentionally open-ended. It really is whatever you and the students agree upon. Maybe it's creating some kind of promotional video, or maybe it's doing a roof inspection, some crop analysis for a local farmer. It really is up to your students' imaginations, as long as they stay within any local ordinances and, of course, the FAA guidelines. Now, it's up to you whether you want to restrict this to just other organizations within the school, and potential organizations, yearbook, maybe the marching band, any athletic teams or clubs, things like that. Or if you want to also open it up to other organizations in the community, like maybe scouting or 4-H or something like that. One thing that I might recommend is, as a time saver, if you as the teacher would want to establish some of these contacts before you get to this lesson, and maybe assemble a roster of groups either within the school or within the community that students could choose. That's going to save a lot of time on the front end, because then students aren't going to have to spend any time going back and forth with different organizations, seeing if they need help, etc. So once students are assigned to an organization, they're going to then decide on what kind of project they want to do and how they think that they could help. They'll pitch it to the organization, get some feedback, and then start to develop a detailed mission plan. Students will then fly the mission and prepare the final product for the organization that they've chosen to help. Now, there are going to be several milestones throughout this project, and we're going to discuss those in just a bit. But there will be a structure throughout the 12 sessions so that students don't get to the end and realize that they're going to be way behind. There are going to be daily goal sheets that you'll find in a project packet that we provide. So every day, students are going to be identifying certain goals that they want to accomplish that day, and you'll be meeting with the students throughout to discuss how they're coming along and what they need to alter. Other things that you're going to find in your project packet are going to be a teaching aid. You'll find a milestone sheet, mission planning sheets. You'll find flight sheets that they'll use as a log for every flight that they do, etc. And on this slide, you can see that we have a timeline laid out from the start of the project to the end. And this is, of course, a rough timeline, but you're going to want to give students approximately 4 days to plan the mission, another 4 to, finish up planning to fly the mission at some point, and then the final 4 to really prepare the product. At the end, they're also going to want to prepare a brief presentation that they can give to the rest of the class, which is going to detail the project that they chose and how it went for them. As they go through the project, major milestones that they're going to be consulting with you on are going to include choosing a project, and then planning the mission, flying the mission, and then finally assembling the end product. Now, one thing that I would note here is that unlike the previous lesson I discussed, where I said that everyone should be rotating roles, everyone needs a turn to do everything, this mission is going to be a bit different. Everyone should actually choose one role within the team that they're going to carry out. So you're going to have a designated PIC. If it's a student that's Part 107 rated, that would be optimal. So if you do have anyone that's passed the test, has earned their certificate, you're going to want that person to be PIC in their group likely. A designated manipulator of the controls, visual observers, etc. Also, the important thing is that everyone in the group plays some role in the final project, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a role in the drone mission. For example, say that you have one student whose talent really lies with video editing and taking whatever the team has captured on the drone, putting it together and preparing the final product. That's absolutely okay as well, just so they have some hand in developing whatever the team is handing in at the end. To conclude this video, I would like to address some frequently asked questions that we tend to get from teachers. The first of these involves the materials that are required for the activities in the latter part of the year. We talk about a classroom drone or drones, a drone simulator, and sometimes we're asked what exactly you are going to need to teach this class. Well, the one thing that we kind of set out as a minimum requirement is that everyone that's teaching the drone course have at least one classroom drone. And that's simply because the experience is not going to be at all the same for students if you don't have a drone in the classroom. It's really necessary in order for them to get that hands-on experience flying it. If you do have one drone, like I said, I would highly recommend at least having multiple batteries for that drone, but having one drone is definitely acceptable. That being said, if your school does have the resources where you're able to get more drones than a single drone, having several would certainly be an ideal situation, because then there would be times where you can have multiple groups flying the drone at the same time, which is going to make things a lot easier and more efficient. And as far as the simulator, again, you don't need one, but if you're able to get one, that would certainly be ideal, especially if you're going to have a single drone in the classroom. Kind of going along with that, one thing that we tend to be asked is what we would recommend as far as the drones that you should purchase for the class, or which simulators are the best, etc. The first thing that I want to say is that AOPA does not officially endorse any specific models of drones or simulators. But that being said, we do include with the lesson a document that has some ideas for models of drones. And I will say, though again, it's not an endorsement, here at the office, when we've been flying drones and putting these activities together, we've been using a DJI Tello drone, and it's an EDU model. It's designed specifically for STEM education, and it really does seem to be a good, inexpensive, all-around drone. It's got video capabilities, and the quality is actually pretty good, and it also tends to be very robust, and we've certainly put that to the test at times as well. There are other drones out there that are specifically designed for STEM curriculums. And really what I found is just going onto Google, typing in best STEM drones or best education drones, you're going to get several lists that are going to give you a variety of ideas. And then you can decide which one best suits your classroom. But broadly speaking, the only requirements that we really have are we would like it to be a multi-copter type drone instead of a fixed wing. And it would also be good if it did have some kind of video capabilities. And also if it's fairly easy to fly and is more robust, because you're going to have new pilots who are trying it out. As far as simulators go, we really don't have any firm recommendations there, but again, you can find a variety of good, inexpensive simulators as apps. And some of the ones that you can download on your computer, one thing I would say is that there are some higher end ones that might initially seem out of your price range. For example, the one that's provided by DJI. But a lot of these higher end simulators will actually have trial versions that will allow you to use them, and you're just going to be a bit more restricted as to what you can do within the simulation. But for this purpose, where we're just using them for students to sort of initially get a handle on how to fly a drone, the trial versions are great. So that's definitely something to look into as well. One thing we're asked is when you should have these materials by. And what I typically say there, the sooner the better, first of all, but the time that it really becomes essential for you to have a classroom drone would be the beginning of Unit 9. And that's because even though that's not the part of the unit yet where students are going to be flying the drone, they are going to start researching the specific model of drone that you've purchased for the class. So you're going to be looking at the manufacturer information. You're going to be looking at online forums and seeing what you can find out, because as we said throughout the semester, it's important not to just know in general terms what system a drone has, but you need to really understand the specific model as far as the technology that you have available to you and the modes that you can use, things like that. And then finally, a question that we get is, if your class does have a single drone, what happens, say, if something happens to the drone and you suddenly end up without a drone in your class? how can the final project be completed? Well, there are a couple things that I would say. First is that for your classroom drone, in addition to having several batteries, you're also going to want to have some replacement parts for the parts that are going to most commonly need replaced. For example, I am not sure that many of these are original propellers or original prop guards. They're the kind of thing that on a model like this you're going to go through. So have some of those so that a small mishap does not end up grounding your drone. Also, if you do end up not having a drone for the final project, you could allow students to use their own drones. A lot of students will likely have them. And you could also just make the emphasis of the project so that it's not flying the mission and providing a product at the end, but instead change the emphasis so that it's more detailed in mission planning and then pitching the mission plan to the team's client. Might not be quite as fun or as exciting that way, but it would be a way that you could proceed even without a drone. There's one more topic that I want to address, and it's an important one. And it concerns what your students will and won't be able to do as part of the final project, depending upon whether or not they have a student with a Part 107 rating in their group. Now, before I talk about any of this, I want to first emphasize that I'm not a lawyer and I don't even play one in workshop videos. So don't take any of this as legal advice. Instead, I only mean these as broad best practices that you can adopt just to ensure that you're definitely going to be on the right side of any kind of action that the FAA might take. So the first thing is to look at how many students in your class have a Part 107 rating. And there are several scenarios here. I mean, maybe you've gotten your Part 107 rating, but none of your students have actually earned theirs. You might also have a scenario where you have several students that have a Part 107 rating, and that would certainly be the best case. And then you could have a scenario where no one in the class has a Part 107. So the way that your class is structured, depending on who has a rating and who doesn't, is going to have a lot to do with what can and can't be done in the final project. So, for example, let's first look at what's going to happen if a student has a Part 107 rating. And this is an easy scenario to address because the students really have a lot of leeway then. Regardless of what they want to do, whether it's for a student group or a nonprofit, say that you want to shoot a promotional video for a local scout troop, you do it, they post the video online on their website. Even though that's certainly in furtherance of a business, it's still okay because your students are certificated commercial pilots. And the same would go for a roof inspection or analyzing the crops of a farmer. So if they have their Part 107, they really are going to be in good shape. But at the same time, it's necessary to address what it's going to look like in a group where no one is Part 107 rated. Well, in these cases, you are not going to be able to shoot a video or provide a service that is actually used by another business, even if it's a not-for-profit or a nonprofit. So there are going to be a lot more restrictions on these groups. Now you might be wondering, if you do have groups of students where no one is Part 107 certificated, are they going to be really restricted as to what they can and cannot do? Well, fortunately, I have several suggestions that you can follow, and I think you'll find that they'll still give these students a good amount of leeway and allow them to do the final project. First, if you'll recall when I said that it would be a great idea if all of you could become Part 107 certificated, well, this is kind of where that comes into play. If you have your Part 107 certificate, you would be able to act as the pilot in command for any group during its mission. That way, even though the students would still be the ones planning the mission in detail and serving as the other crew members, the visual observer, manipulator of controls, etc., and then they would still be the ones that would be preparing the final product, During the flight, you would be able to serve as the PIC. The only thing to remember there is that you would only be able to serve as PIC for one group at a time. Another option is just to remember that everything that the FAA has jurisdiction over is outdoors in the National Airspace System. Anything that's occurring within the school, whether it's within your classroom or within the gym, all of that is fine. So even if you have a group that decides to do a promotional video for, say, the basketball team, and you do it in the gym, even if the school does choose to post that video on its website, you're still going to be on the right side of things legally because it was all done indoors. And even activity that would otherwise be considered commercial activity is fine if you're doing it inside. A final option would be to allow students to prepare a product as they would even if they had their Part 107 certificate, but then just not make that product available to the public. So you would want to establish somewhere, online that is dedicated specifically to the class project. This would allow students to post their videos, they could present them to the class, but they would never actually be used by the client. So you would never have the client potentially posting the videos online, which again would be interpreted as being in furtherance of a business. So these are just a few of the ideas of things that you could do if your students get to the end of the year and still are not Part 107 certificated. But again, I would strongly encourage them to go out and get that certificate because it's going to be a valuable credential and one that would start to allow them to work professionally in the drone world.